While we struggle with depleted soils and expensive fertilizers, Viking farmers created some of the richest, most productive gardens, using nothing but what nature provided. Today, we're discovering 12 forgotten Viking soil building techniques that transformed barren Scandinavian earth into thriving agricultural powerhouses. Seaweed, gold, the ocean's gift to Viking gardens. The Vikings called seaweed sea gold, and for good reason. Coastal Viking settlements systematically harvested kelp, bladderwrack, and other seaweeds during low tides, creating what modern farmers would recognize as the ultimate organic fertilizer. They developed specific timing for collection, preferring seaweed gathered after storms, when the ocean delivered the freshest, most nutrient-dense varieties directly to their shores. Viking families would organize community seaweed harvests, with entire settlements working together during optimal tidal conditions. They understood that different types of seaweed provided different benefits. Kelp for heavy feeding crops like grains, bladderwrack for root vegetables, and sea lettuce for leafy greens. This wasn't random gathering, but sophisticated agricultural planning based on generations of observation. Modern science has proven why this worked so brilliantly. Seaweed contains over 60 trace minerals that land-based fertilizers often lack, plus natural growth hormones called cytokinins that stimulate plant development. It's like having a slow-release fertilizer factory that also conditions your soil structure. The salt content, rather than harming plants, actually helped preserve the organic matter and prevented certain soil diseases while improving the soil's ability to retain moisture. Archaeological evidence from Viking coastal settlements shows dedicated seaweed processing areas with stone-lined pits for aging the harvest. They would layer fresh seaweed with soil and let it decompose for months, creating a concentrated soil amendment that was easier to transport to inland fields. Today, coastal gardeners are rediscovering this technique, applying fresh seaweed directly to garden beds in fall, or composting it first for more controlled application. Wood ash alchemy, turning fire into fertility. Vikings practiced controlled slash-and-burn agriculture, but they were masters at capturing every benefit from the process. After clearing forest land, they didn't just burn the debris, they carefully collected and aged the resulting wood ash in covered stone containers, protecting this precious resource from rain, while allowing it to mellow into the perfect soil amendment. Their ash management system was incredibly sophisticated. Vikings understood that fresh wood ash was too caustic for direct application, so they developed aging processes that could take up to 2 years. They would mix ash with rainwater in wooden troughs, stirring regularly and testing the mixture by observing how it affected small test plots. This created a liquid fertilizer that could be applied precisely where needed. The science behind this is remarkable. Wood ash contains potassium, calcium, phosphorus, and trace minerals in forms that plants can immediately absorb. It also raises soil pH, which was crucial in the naturally acidic Scandinavian soils created by heavy rainfall and coniferous forests. Vikings discovered that different wood types produced ash with different properties. Hardwood ash from oak and beech was prized for vegetable gardens, while softwood ash from pine and spruce worked better for grain fields. They even developed seasonal application schedules, applying aged ash in early spring for immediate nutrient availability, and in late fall for slow release benefits throughout winter. Modern gardeners can use this same technique, though with important safety considerations. Wood ash should be aged for several months and applied sparingly, no more than 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet annually. It's particularly valuable for tomatoes, potatoes, and root vegetables that crave the potassium boost Vikings discovered centuries ago. The Manure mastery, Viking composting systems. While other medieval farmers simply spread fresh animal waste, Vikings developed sophisticated composting systems that maximized nutrient retention while eliminating pathogens. They created layered piles combining cattle, sheep, and pig manure with straw, food scraps, and even human waste from their longhouses, managing these piles with the precision of modern composting experts. Viking composting sites were carefully engineered installations. They built stone-lined pits with drainage systems to prevent nutrient leaching while maintaining optimal moisture levels. The piles were constructed in specific ratios, typically 3 parts carbon-rich materials like straw and leaves to 1 part nitrogen-rich manure. They understood that this balance was crucial for proper decomposition and heat generation. Their secret was understanding the heat cycle. Vikings knew that properly managed compost piles would heat up enough to kill harmful bacteria and parasites, something modern science confirms happens at temperatures above 131 degrees Fahrenheit. They developed techniques for monitoring pile temperature using wooden probes, and would turn their piles at specific intervals to ensure even decomposition throughout the mass. The Vikings also practiced seasonal composting, starting new piles in spring and fall when weather conditions were optimal for microbial activity. They would cover piles with turf or wooden planks to regulate moisture and temperature while preventing nutrient loss from rain. Research shows that well-composted manure provides slow-release nitrogen, improves soil structure, and increases water retention by up to 20%. Vikings were essentially creating custom soil amendments tailored to their specific crops and soil conditions, with finished compost that was both safe and incredibly nutrient-rich. Enjoying raiding the past with us? Then consider using YouTube's new feature and hype this video. It really helps a small channel like mine get more views and allows me to create more content. To hype the video on your mobile device, swipe left on the comment preview carousel until the option to hype the video surfaces, or tap and the carousel will change to show the option to hype. Your support helps a ton. Now back to the Vikings' soil building techniques. Bone meal and fish power, the protein-rich soil amendment. Viking fishing and hunting provided more than food. They created a steady supply of bone meal and fish waste that became the foundation of their soil building program. After butchering animals or processing fish catches, nothing went to waste. Bones were systematically crushed using stone hammers and aged in dedicated pits, while fish heads, scales, and processing waste were composted using specific techniques that maximized nutrient extraction. The bone processing system was particularly sophisticated. Vikings would first boil bones to extract marrow and remaining meat, then dry them thoroughly before crushing. Different bones were processed differently. Large mammal bones were crushed coarse for slow-release phosphorus, while bird bones were ground fine for immediate availability. They understood that bone meal needed to be aged and partially decomposed to be most effective. Fish waste processing was equally advanced. Vikings developed fermentation techniques that broke down fish scraps into liquid fertilizers that could be applied directly to crops. They would layer fish waste with seaweed and allow controlled decomposition in sealed containers, creating concentrated fertilizers that modern science recognizes as incredibly effective plant nutrition. The Vikings understood something that modern science has confirmed. Phosphorus is the limiting factor in most plant growth, and bone meal provides it in a slow-release form that feeds plants for months. Fish waste adds nitrogen and trace minerals while improving soil biology with beneficial bacteria and enzymes. Archaeological evidence shows Viking settlements had dedicated bone-crushing areas and fish composting pits, indicating this wasn't casual recycling, but systematic soil management that required significant labor investment but provided returns for years. Marling magic, the clay that changed everything. Vikings discovered that certain clay deposits, rich in lime and minerals, could transform acidic, infertile soils into productive farmland. This practice, called marling, involved hauling clay-rich marl from specific quarries and spreading it on fields, backbreaking work that paid dividends for generations. Viking communities would organize marling expeditions, with entire settlements working together to transport this precious soil amendment. The Vikings developed sophisticated techniques for identifying the best marl deposits. They understood that not all clay was suitable. The best marl contained high levels of calcium carbonate, shell fragments, and specific mineral compositions that varied by location. They would test different deposits by applying small amounts to test plots and observing the results over multiple growing seasons. Modern soil science explains why marling worked so well. The lime in marl neutralizes soil acidity, making nutrients more available to plants while creating optimal conditions for beneficial soil microorganisms. The clay particles improve soil structure, helping sandy soils retain moisture and nutrients while making heavy soils drain better. It's essentially a complete soil renovation system that addresses multiple problems simultaneously. What made Viking marling special was their systematic approach to application. They developed spreading techniques that ensured even distribution and would apply marl in specific seasons when weather conditions allowed for optimal incorporation into existing soil. They understood that marling was a long-term investment. Properly marled fields would remain productive for decades with minimal additional inputs. Today, agricultural lime serves a similar function, but the Vikings' whole system approach of combining mineral amendment with organic matter was far more comprehensive and sustainable. Shell sand secrets, coastal mineral mining. Coastal Vikings discovered that certain beaches contained shell-rich sand that worked like magic on their gardens. This wasn't ordinary sand. It was composed of crushed shells, coral fragments, and mineral-rich sediments that provided calcium, trace minerals, and improved soil drainage simultaneously. Viking coastal communities developed detailed knowledge of which beaches produced the best shell sand and when to harvest it for maximum effectiveness. The collection process was highly organized. Vikings understood that shell sand quality varied with tides, seasons, and weather patterns. They preferred sand collected after major storms, when wave action had freshly crushed shells and concentrated the mineral-rich particles. Different beaches produce sand with different characteristics, some rich in oyster shells for heavy clay soils, others with mixed shell content for general soil improvement. The calcium carbonate in shell sand slowly dissolves, providing long-term pH buffering and calcium nutrition that plants need for strong cell walls and disease resistance. Modern research shows that calcium-deficient soils produce weak plants susceptible to various disorders, something Vikings observed and corrected centuries before. We understood the science behind plant nutrition. Vikings were also selective about application timing and methods. They would spread shell sand in fall, allowing winter weather to begin the dissolution process, or mix it with compost for more immediate availability. They understood that different crops responded differently to shell sand applications. Root vegetables thrived with direct applications, while leafy greens preferred shell sand that had been composted with organic matter first. Today's organic gardeners are rediscovering crushed oyster shell and other shell-based amendments that provide the same slow-release calcium and trace mineral benefits that made Viking gardens so productive. Ridge and furrow revolution, engineering better soil. Vikings didn't just plow their fields, they engineered them using ridge and furrow systems that simultaneously improved drainage, increased soil depth, and created microclimates for different crops. This wasn't simple farming. It was agricultural engineering that maximized every square foot of arable land while building soil fertility through strategic organic matter placement and water management. The construction of ridge and furrow systems required significant planning and community effort. Vikings would lay out fields using sophisticated surveying techniques, ensuring proper slope and drainage patterns. The ridges were typically 6 to 8 feet apart and raised 12 to 18 inches above the furrows, creating distinct growing zones with different moisture and nutrient characteristics. The raised ridges provided better drainage for root crops and grains, while the furrows collected organic matter and moisture for plants that needed more water. Over time, the constant cultivation and organic matter addition in the furrows created incredibly rich, deep soil that could support intensive agriculture even in challenging climates. The system also prevented erosion by controlling water flow and creating natural barriers to soil movement. Vikings understood that ridge and furrow systems required ongoing maintenance and improvement. They would add organic matter to furrows annually, adjust ridge heights based on crop requirements, and modify drainage patterns as needed. The system was dynamic, evolving with changing conditions and crop rotations. Modern permaculture designers are rediscovering these principles in techniques like hugelkultur and keyline design. Archaeological evidence shows some Viking ridge systems that are still visible today, testament to their durability and effectiveness in creating sustainable, productive agricultural systems. Crop rotation wisdom, the 3-field system plus. While other medieval farmers used simple 2-field rotation, Vikings developed more sophisticated systems that included nitrogen-fixing legumes, soil-building cover crops, and strategic fallow periods that actually improved soil fertility rather than just resting it. Their rotation systems were based on careful observation of how different crops affected soil conditions and what combinations produced the best long-term results. The typical Viking rotation cycle lasted 4 to 6 years and included multiple phases designed to build and maintain soil fertility. The first year might feature nitrogen-demanding grains like barley or oats, followed by legumes such as peas or beans that fixed atmospheric nitrogen back into the soil. The third year often included root crops that broke up soil compaction while adding organic matter through their extensive root systems. Their rotation typically included grains, legumes, root crops, and a managed fallow period where they grazed animals and added organic matter. But Vikings took it further. They understood which crops depleted specific nutrients and which ones restored them. They knew that certain plant combinations actually enhanced each other's growth and soil improvement capabilities when grown in sequence. The fallow periods weren't truly fallow. Vikings used these years for intensive soil building through controlled grazing, green manure crops, and organic matter addition. They would plant specific cover crops that improved soil structure and fertility, then incorporate these plants into the soil before the next crop cycle began. Modern research confirms that proper crop rotation can increase soil organic matter by 20 to 30% while reducing pest and disease pressure. Vikings were essentially practicing regenerative agriculture centuries before the term existed, creating farming systems that improved soil health with each passing year. Peat power, mining the bog for garden gold. Vikings living near peat bogs discovered that this partially decomposed organic matter could transform poor soils into productive gardens. They developed sophisticated techniques for harvesting, processing, and applying peat that maximized its soil-building benefits while avoiding the problems that come with raw peat application. Peat harvesting was a community activity that required careful planning and specialized knowledge. The harvesting process was highly selective. Vikings understood that different layers of peat had different characteristics and uses. Surface peat was lighter and better for seed starting and delicate plants, while deeper, more decomposed peat was ideal for heavy soil amendment and long-term soil building. They developed tools specifically for peat cutting that minimized disturbance to the bog ecosystem while maximizing harvest efficiency. The key was their processing method. Vikings would harvest peat, then compost it with animal manure and other organic materials, creating a soil amendment that combined peat's water retention and organic matter with additional nutrients. This composting process could take up to 2 years, with regular turning and moisture management, to ensure proper decomposition and nutrient integration. Modern science shows that properly processed peat can increase soil organic matter dramatically, while improving both water retention and drainage, seemingly contradictory benefits that result from peat's unique cellular structure. What made Viking peat applications special was their understanding of different peat types and their specific applications. Sphagnum peat for acid-loving plants, sedge peat for general soil improvement, and aged peat mixed with lime for heavy clay soils. They also understood seasonal application timing, applying peat-based amendments in fall for winter decomposition and spring availability. Drainage mastery, the foundation of fertile soil. Vikings understood that waterlogged soil was dead soil. They developed comprehensive drainage systems using ditches, channels, and raised beds that kept their gardens productive even during the wettest seasons. This wasn't just about removing excess water. It was about managing water flow to optimize soil biology while preventing erosion and nutrient loss from their carefully built soil systems. Their drainage systems were engineered with remarkable sophistication. Vikings created networks of primary and secondary ditches that followed natural contours while directing water flow to prevent flooding and erosion. The main drainage channels were lined with stones to prevent erosion, while smaller feeder ditches were designed to capture and redirect surface water before it could cause problems. The systems were designed to capture and redirect water while preventing erosion and nutrient loss. Vikings created networks of ditches that fed into constructed wetlands, where nutrients were captured and recycled back into the agricultural system. These wetland areas served as natural filters, removing excess nutrients from drainage water and preventing pollution of streams and rivers. Vikings also understood the importance of subsurface drainage. They would install networks of buried stones and organic matter that created underground drainage channels, allowing excess water to move through the soil profile without carrying away valuable nutrients. This technique required significant labor but created permanently improved growing conditions. Modern research confirms that proper drainage increases soil oxygen levels, promotes beneficial microbial activity, and prevents the anaerobic conditions that create toxic compounds harmful to plants. Vikings were essentially creating the optimal soil environment for the beneficial bacteria and fungi that make nutrients available to plants. Kitchen waste, composting, the less documented technique. While not as thoroughly documented as other Viking practices, archaeological evidence suggests that Viking households systematically composted kitchen scraps, food preparation waste, and other organic materials from their daily lives. Middens, waste deposits, from Viking settlements show organized layering of organic materials that indicates intentional composting rather than random disposal, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of waste recycling for soil improvement. The archaeological evidence includes organized deposits of food scraps, cooking waste, and organic materials that show clear stratification and decomposition patterns, consistent with managed composting. These deposits are found in specific locations within Viking settlements, often near garden areas, indicating intentional placement for soil improvement rather than simple waste disposal. The logic is compelling. Vikings wasted nothing, and kitchen scraps represent a valuable source of nutrients and organic matter. Food scraps, vegetable peelings, cooking waste, and even ash from cooking fires would have been too valuable to simply discard. Modern composting science shows that kitchen waste provides balanced nutrition and beneficial microorganisms that improve soil health and plant growth. Viking households would have generated significant amounts of organic waste from food preparation, cooking, and daily activities. This waste would have included vegetable scraps, fruit peels, grain hulls, cooking ash, and other organic materials that modern composters recognize as valuable inputs. The systematic nature of waste deposits in archaeological sites suggests that Vikings understood the value of this material and developed organized systems for processing it into soil amendments. Today's home composting systems likely mirror what Vikings practiced, layering kitchen scraps with carbon-rich materials like straw or leaves, managing moisture and airflow to create finished compost that dramatically improved soil fertility. Leaf mold creation, the forest floor secret. The final technique, while less documented in historical records, represents logical extension of Viking forest management practices. Vikings living in forested areas would have observed how forest floors created incredibly rich, dark soil through natural leaf decomposition, and likely recreated this process in their gardens. Their sophisticated understanding of organic matter and natural processes makes this technique highly probable. Vikings managed extensive forest areas for timber, fuel, and hunting, giving them intimate knowledge of forest ecology and soil formation processes. They would have observed how fallen leaves created rich, dark soil layers that supported vigorous plant growth, and the logical extension would be to recreate these conditions in their agricultural areas. Leaf mold, the dark, crumbly result of decomposed leaves, creates some of the best soil conditioner available. It improves soil structure, increases water retention by up to 50%, and provides slow-release nutrients while supporting beneficial soil microorganisms. The process requires specific conditions that Vikings would have understood from their forest observations: proper moisture, air circulation, and the right mix of leaf types. Vikings would have had access to abundant fallen leaves from deciduous forests, and their systematic approach to resource utilization suggests they would have developed organized leaf collection and processing systems. Different leaf types create different qualities of leaf mold. Oak leaves for long-lasting soil structure improvement, maple leaves for quick nutrient release, and mixed deciduous leaves for balanced soil conditioning. Modern gardeners who create leaf mold report dramatic improvements in soil quality and plant health. The process is simple, but requires patience. Pile leaves, keep them moist, and wait 12 to 18 months for natural decomposition. While we can't definitively prove Vikings used this technique, their sophisticated understanding of organic matter and soil building makes it highly likely they discovered this forest secret. These 12 forgotten Viking soil building techniques represent more than just ancient farming methods. They're a complete system for creating and maintaining fertile soil using only natural materials and observation. What's remarkable is how accessible these techniques remain today, requiring no expensive inputs or complex equipment. Start with 1 or 2 techniques that match your local resources. Seaweed if you're coastal, wood ash if you heat with wood, or simple composting anywhere.